Eventide Entertainment presents The Drive-In, hosted by Aaron Lopez. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Drive-In. This week's guest host is my friend Amanda. Amanda, thanks for coming on today. Yep. We are really excited to have Amanda on today because our movie that we were reviewing, we'll get into some funny stories here in a second, but the movie that we're reviewing is I, Tonya, and Amanda's kind of got a Tonya Harding fan side to her that I didn't even know. We've been friends here for probably a year or two, and had no idea until I was mentioning the podcast, and she's like, I said, hey, I, Tonya? Absolutely. And she was all excited. Tell everybody about your I said almost I, Tonya, your Tonya Harding interests.
Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Yeah, I am a big fan of Tonya Harding, and I'm not a sports person at all. I'm one of Aaron's theater friends, and one thing that I've always really loved my entire life is a good story. You know, I love to read, I love theater, I love movies, which is why I was so excited to come on this podcast. But also, one thing that I think figure skating in general does of athletics, it tells a story. There's a very artistic element to it. It's not all just scoring goals. There's a really beautiful element to it as well, like similar to dance, like ballet. Yeah. And then with Tonya Harding and her saga, there is just, you can't get a better story than Tonya Harding's.
Yeah, and as we saw, which with the movie, it was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody kept asking, what kind of movie is it? And I'm like, well, it's surprisingly kind of a comedy, but it's not supposed to be a comedy. It's just, you can't write that situation and not have it be at least slightly ironic or comedic. Yeah,
it's a weird movie. It's hard to put into a specific genre. There are a lot of dramatic elements, but there's also, it's not even funny, like laugh out loud funny. There are funny moments, mm-hmm. but I wouldn't call it a comedy either. Yeah. It's somewhere in between.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, the easiest way is just saying this is a biographical film. But before we'll get into that in just a second. We really need to talk about our problems seeing this movie. This experience was like 2.5 weeks in the making, and for me it was like 2 months because the movie actually came out in December, but it didn't come to our neck of the woods in Ohio until actually this past week. So we've been trying. We went to a movie theater a couple weeks ago, had our tickets, showed up, and we found out that the movie had gotten pulled from that theater, and apparently had gotten pulled from many theaters in the area, even though it had already been nationally released. So we were upset. We went and saw Shape of Water, which was good. I'm glad we went and saw that. But we were there to see I, Tonya, so we were kind of disappointed. So a week later, we find out, hey, it's actually showing in the theater. We finally get to, and then it doesn't stop there because we get into our theater, trailers start playing, we're like, okay, all right, and then The Greatest Showman starts playing. And I liked The Greatest Showman. It was fun, but that's not what I was there to see. So luckily there were a couple people in the theater who worked there, and one ran out and got it fixed, but we were destined not to see this movie, it felt like, for the longest time, so glad we finally got to see it. Took forever and a day, but we finally did get to see it. So some behind the scenes, just some background for this. I, Tonya was directed by Craig Gillespie, starring Margot Robbie, Sebastian Stan, and Allison Janney. So just the basics there. I'm pulling really hard for Allison Janney to win the Oscar.
Yes.
Margot Robbie would be fine. I went and saw Lady Bird just about yesterday actually. And so I'm not sure about Robbie as lead, but I am dead set on Janney after seeing this as supporting.
Yes, her performance was incredibly standout, and Allison Janney has had a fantastic career, and I feel like she's kind of due to be recognized.
And she's the hometown girl.
Yes.
Actually, it's funny. I think I mentioned this last week with Mike in the Oscar nominations show, but Allison Janney went to the school that I currently teach at. So I'm kind of hoping that we have some connections. She comes back with her Oscar and is like, look guys, look what I did. But she swings back. And the funny thing is so like side note, she does come to the school every now and then. They said that she hasn't been back for a little while. But my colleague Barb, she's been there since the school started. And so she taught Allison Janney, and she refers to her as Allie, and has had conversations with her and talks to her on the phone, and she just like, oh, look how far she's come, and it's just another one of her former students, whereas I'm thinking, you're talking about Allison Janney, who's been in everything, the mom in pretty much every movie you've ever seen. So it's really funny. I think that it'd be pretty cool if she won. Okay, so before we get started actually talking about the movie, we have to talk about our trailers, our coming attractions. So we had 5, which for me, it was very small amount of number for trailers. Something that I keep noticing is that Ohio usually plays like 7 or 8 movies. Everywhere else plays like 3 or 4. But we got a nice even number 5 here. And I had seen all except for one, so we'll talk about them. But Gemini was the first one. Gemini being kind of a murder mystery. 1517 to Paris. 50 Shades Freed, again. Thoroughbreds, and then finally Red Sparrow. Amanda, did any of those catch your eye of things that you're kind of excited to go see?
No.
No?
Nothing caught my eye in a positive light, I feel. There were a few that were, oh, that looks atmospheric. And then there were a few where I was like, that looks terrible.
Which ones did you think looked terrible?
Well, first of all, 50 Shades Free.
Oh my god, if I have to see that trailer again, I swear.
I read the first book and I saw the first movie. I actually watched the first movie on my honeymoon.
Ooh.
But the book was absolutely horrendous. One of the worst books I've ever read in my entire life.
And you've read a lot of books.
I've read a lot of books. And it started off as a Twilight fan fiction. And I have read a lot of fan fiction. And for that fan fiction to be the international success, that's just appalling. I've read phenomenal fan fictions. And then the movie was actually a little bit better than anticipated.
Okay.
But it was still bad.
But it's still bad, yeah. In comparison.
And this one just it just raises all of my hackles and like feminist hackles. Ugh.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the trailer begins with Good Morning Wife, Good Morning Husband.
Ugh.
And you're just like, oh, jeez.
It's so bad.
And I mean, everybody has their own way of doing things, but that just pushes it. And you're like, it just makes you groan. And you're like,
she's like, I can't believe this is my life that I get to live with you.
Yeah, midway through the trailer, she's on her knees saying, yes, sir. I mean, I don't know. I know that's kind of the appeal. It's the dominatrix kind of a... Not just the dominatrix, but the S&M kind of a relationship that they have. So, yeah, I haven't seen any of them, or read any of the books, so I have
the problem with 50 Shades is you can have a very healthy and loving dom-sub relationship. But 50 Shades of Grey is absolutely not a healthy relationship. Mm-hmm. And it's not, because Anastasia is not an actual submissive. And I would argue that Christian Grey is not an actual dominant. There's a lot of emotional and mental health problems that result in this very abusive relationship. So it's a very poor portrayal of an actual...
Well, and then by the end of the third one, you've got, apparently from the trailer at least, you have car chases and explosions, and that's just not healthy for any relationship. So, the one that I had, and I mentioned Gemini. Gemini looked okay. I'm not sure. I mean, it depends when it comes out if I'll go and see it, but it kind of portrayed a friendship between a celebrity and her kind of less celebrity friend, and the potential that she may have killed her friend, and it was just... It looks interesting, but I don't know if it necessarily is one I'm going to run to go see.
No.
Of the 5, it was one that jumped out to me. The other one that I'm really excited to see is Thoroughbreds, mostly just because it's Anton Yelkin's last movie. It's the last one that he had filmed before. And granted, this came out, he died about a year or two ago with the Jeep accident, so it's very late in the game for this one to come out, but I will be going to see that one. And then we finally heard Jennifer Lawrence speak in the wonderful Russian accent in Red Sparrow.
That looks really bad.
I don't know. Like I was intrigued by the first one, but then again she didn't talk in the first trailer that I saw, and then the second one I saw and she's talking, and I'm like, this looks bad.
Yeah, I've seen that trailer a handful of times, and her accent does not sound good, and like the fact that I think she's supposed to be implied to be a ballet dancer, and I'm just like, no, I don't believe
it's
that.
Really pushing the Russia. Like, it's like heavy Russia with it. So, Joel Edgerton's in it. I love him, but I'm not gonna run to go see it. He's done a lot of good stuff, but if this one comes across as something that I go see, it's gonna pretty much just be because of the graphic nudity and there's nothing else in it. So, we'll see. All right. But yeah, so we're gonna jump right into our spoiler-free summary, and it's gonna be a short one because, guys, this is based on a biographical story. So if you do not want to hear spoilers, you probably shouldn't listen to this one at all. We don't need to give you a spoiler-free summary. This is based solely on things that actually happened. So, if you haven't yet seen the movie, go see it. It's awesome. But the summary itself is just Tonya Harding's story. So we can kind of leave it at that. All right, so to kind of bring this I was looking through to kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to talk about this movie? Because plot-wise, it's just her story. And there's a lot of little things that go on throughout it. But I think the best way to start out is just its style. And I think this was something that you kind of saw in the trailers and kind of didn't, was the documentary style. Felt like a documentary, but one of the aspects that I thought was really interesting was the fourth wall breaking throughout. So it was a blend of two styles of film. And I think it worked. It was different. It was kind of weird at first. But I think for this kind of story, it did work. What do you think?
I thought it worked really well because it is a 30-year-old news story at this point, and anyone who's going to see this movie most likely knows at least the bare basics of what happened. So there's no need to keep suspense by not giving you information.
Yeah.
You know, everybody knows it already. So I think that having this documentary style, and it helps lead to the feeling of didn't she, which is that's the true unanswered question in Tonya Harding's story. We know the facts, we know like the timeline, we know how everything happened, but what we don't know, and we'll probably never know, is Tonya Harding's motivation and involvement with the whole thing.
All speculation. Yeah.
Everyone has a different opinion of what she intended.
Yeah, I think this is kind of interesting because I looked to see how she thought about, or what her thoughts are on this movie, and she wasn't necessarily upset with it. I think she was happy with the way it portrayed it. It didn't really necessarily say, hey, she had an involvement. In my opinion, it kind of actually made it seem like she really didn't know the ultimate, end game of the attack, that she was really not even completely on board with the letters concept of it too. So, if anything, it's going to make her seem a little more innocent in it. So I think that, and I think that Robbie did a great job of portraying her, showing who she really was. And I actually think I have seen the interview that the movie was based around, because they're actually, it starts out by saying that this movie is based on interviews that you can't make up, and thank God they happened, because now we get to tell this story. And Tonya embraces her redneck kind of background, and she's who she is, and she doesn't care if you don't like it. So I think that Robbie did a good job of portraying that. All right, so we jump right into the beginning of her life in the 1970s in Oregon. And young Tonya, little 4-year-old Tonya, is out on the ice, and this is where we're first introduced to Diane and Levana. And what an introduction to Levana, I thought. I was so excited to see Janny's performance in this, and every time, she was one of those characters, every time she was on screen, you just were kind of happy, because whether or not the character was doing positive things, it was just acted so well.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was really happy with her being a focal point early on. One of the things that jumped out to me early on that kind of bothered me, and I want your input on this, is the CGI of, both Margot Robbie as Tonya Harding, and then the younger Tonya Harding. I kind of had a double take at first of like, okay, is that actually the CGI? Is that her face? To me, it really reminded me, it's funny that you mentioned Twilight earlier, it reminded me of is it Renesmee?
Oh, yes.
In the fourth or fifth movie, whatever it was, when it was very clear that wasn't her face.
Yeah, like of a baby.
Yeah. I was like, you couldn't just get a baby.
Like, babies all look the same.
But it just reminded me of that, where I was like, I couldn't necessarily, it didn't really ruin the movie for me, but it kind of drew my attention away from it. And I'm sure it's because they needed somebody who looked a certain part, but then to also not, whether or not they could skate. What were your thoughts on it? Like, did it bother you? Is it something that you noticed?
I did notice it. in terms of the child and the younger version of Tonya, I feel like they probably could have found a kid who could skate that.
Yeah. She was like, I think 8? Something like that?
Yeah, there was like a little baby Tonya who was like 3 or 4, a soft 4.
Yeah, soft 4. And actually, the editing for that one, you never actually saw her skate.
Mm-hmm.
They never showed her skating. You just saw her face moving. So that one was okay.
Then there was slightly older child Tonya. I don't know how old she was, but, you know, I think they could have found a kid out there in America who could have skated that. But the problem with adult Tonya and why they had to do CGI is there's a reason Tonya Harding is so famous for landing the triple axel. Women can't do that. It's very incredibly difficult. You can't just go find a body double who can do it. Not even someone that looks like Tonya Harding. Literally anyone. Yeah. There's only been less than 10 women in the world, and in competitive figure skating, there have been 3 women who have completed it from the United States in competition. Tonya Harding was the first, and then there was one of the girls who's going to be on this year's Winter Olympics, so support her. I don't remember her name. Maya Sato. It's not Maya Sato. That's the Japanese woman along with Midori Ito who completed it. There were 2 Japanese women who completed it at the Olympics. Her name is Mirai Nagasu. Okay. That's her name. Mirai Nagasu also landed it in competition, and she's going to be on the Olympics team this year, and she's going to be the only woman who's planned to try to attempt to land the triple axel of all the women competing. So she's not really favored to medal. None of the American women are. The American men are much more stacked this year. But if she lands the triple axel at the Olympics, that would be great. Yeah.
I mean, and that was one of the things that they kept saying, that Levana kept saying throughout the movie before she ever competed in like a national. She's like, doesn't matter what she looks like, doesn't matter what she's doing, she can land a triple. Mm-hmm. And I think that was one of the major driving points that, especially in the real Tonya Harding's life, is that it didn't matter where she came from. She could do something that almost nobody could do, and no one had done up to that point.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, and that definitely is something that I considered when I was looking at, well, here's why we need to have this person. I know that editing got a Oscar nomination for this movie, and I mean, it wasn't necessarily edited poorly. It was edited.
Yeah, the way that they chose to do it didn't really lend itself to realistic looks, I feel. Because there are other movies like, say, Black Swan, who did kind of similar things with Natalie Portman. That looked a lot more convincing in that movie, I feel. So.
Well, and she did do a lot of training, so a lot of it was her.
And Margot Robbie, I know, trained as well, but like that's pretty...
You can only do so much when you're starting from nothing in your 20s or 30s.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that was a great. It was done in a way that to me didn't really detract from the movie, but personally, I liked it more when I knew it wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. So, which was pretty much any time that their actual difficult skating was happening. But again, that's just how they had to do it.
The camera work during that was really interesting, too. I watched a behind-the-scenes type of video. Yeah. And the way that they filmed those was the cameraman was on ice skates skating around either Margot Robbie or the body doubles that they had.
That'd been cool.
Yeah, so that's pretty... And that, I thought, was very effective into making it more exciting.
Yeah, you were there on the ice with them. Yeah.
As opposed to when you watch footage and it's just the camera panning back and forth. So I appreciated that. I do wish the CGI had been a little smoother.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that's something that we just kind of have to deal with. We are getting better and better with technology, but sometimes it's very difficult to do CGI on somebody who is moving as quickly as that, doing things like that. And I think they did a decent job with it, with what they were given. So now we move on to older Tonya, 15-year-old Tonya, who I thought was really funny. That whole age range, that was probably my favorite part because it introduces her to Jeff Gillooly, to Sean Eckhart, to first time we see Robbie and Janny on screen together, and I thought it was just really, I mean, it was really well done, but it was just funny. The braces, the haircut is just, but that was real. Like, that's what she was doing.
That's what she looked like in the late 80s. She had that poofy short haircut.
That's great. I look back and I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure you could go through and see, 9 out of 10 women from the 80s had that look at one point or another.
Absolutely.
It was so popular. But yeah, she meets with Jeff and Sean and Sean. This guy is, it's funny if you look at the actual interviews and you see just how well, first off, the actor portrayed it.
He was one of the best, I think, embodying his real life character. He played that so well. I've watched a lot of the interviews before the movie, and I was very impressed with him and how accurate he was.
Yeah, and I've never heard of this guy before. Paul Walter Hauser. He has been in a few things, but nothing. The last thing that he was in was before. Let's see, he's going to be in Super Troopers 2, which is great. Excited for that one. But the last thing before that was Locked Away. Never heard of it. No. He was in a TV series called Kingdom, which I've never heard of. He was on Superstore for an episode. And that's a bit about it. He's really not been in anything. He was in Key and Peele. He's more of a TV guy. And even at that, as a TV guy, he's not been featured. This guy came out of nowhere, I think really just because the look. He fit Sean Eckhart so well.
Yeah, he looked exactly like him.
Oh, man. He did so well from beginning to end. You felt like this guy had absolutely no idea what was going on, but truly believed, like he believed everything he was saying was true. So it's hard to act like a moron who thinks he's a genius. It's easy to be a moron who thinks he's a genius, but to actually pretend like, hey, somebody who knows what's going on, to say, all right, I'm going to go back, pretend like I don't know what's going on, but I have to pretend like that person knows what's going on.
I want to watch some interviews with him as an actor. I want to see how he is when he's not acting.
That would be cool.
I'm curious.
And this is the first time we see Sean, but it seems like almost every scene Sean is in, he's eating. Like, and I think that was like he's eating nachos or pretzel or dinner with his parents, or the guy's eating in every single thing. Which makes me wonder is the actual Sean Eckhart was caught on camera in like these interviews with Tonya or things like that. If the guy was eating in the background, I'd be curious to see if that actually was going on. But yeah, so then we see Jeff and Tanya's relationship start to develop. And it seems really at the beginning the way that Sebastian Stan plays Jeff Galooly, and it seems that they're meant for each other. They just seem like really, really good couple. But then quickly you see the physical abuse start. I really want to know what you think about this, because I thought it was portrayed quite realistically, and I mean, it's hard to even say this, but quite well. As far as if you're going to show it and try to make it feel real, it felt real. So I think that both Stan and Robbie did a really good job of selling it as real domestic violence. But what did you think? Because some of it was quite disturbing.
I think it did a really good job of showing the cyclical nature of abusive relationships.
Yeah, I agree.
And how oftentimes, and not only with Jeff and Tonya, but also her mom and Tonya as well, about how things will escalate to a point and you think, this is it, this is my breaking point, I'm done, and then you calm down and you go back, and it's just over and over again. And part of me almost feels, though, that they focused on it too long just in terms of the storytelling aspect.
Yeah.
It's like, we get it. She had a very terrible childhood, an abusive mom, and she had a very tumultuous, abusive relationship. It's like there's this meme from some TV show where this cop guy's going, cool motive, still murder. You know, it's like you had this terrible background, and that makes you more sympathetic towards her.
Yeah.
But, like, crimes are still committed. You're still your own person.
Yeah.
So it's like, how far is that an excuse?
Yeah. And how much of it can we attribute to her background?
That's one thing, though, that this just made me think. The movie did such a good job of showing Tonya consistently dodging any responsibility and blame.
Yeah, it did.
she would be like, well, it's not my fault I fell. My skate broke. She'd be like, oh, well, it's not my fault I got a low score. The judges didn't like me because I'm poor redneck. You know, it's not my fault Nancy got clubbed in the knee.
Yeah.
Spoilers. You know, it was my terrible abusive family, right?
Yeah, and I think that was one of those things that came out very strongly. If you have seen the original interview, is that she deflects a lot, which makes you wonder, you know, how much did she know, or is that just her nature? You know, that and so that's, again, it's one of those stories that you can't write. You know, it's a perfect storm of everything. So that way, unless something actually comes out that we find out, we're probably never going to know, because of her background makes her more sympathetic. And, you know, just her story is one that is so two-sided that I think that, we'll talk about it later, but it probably ends up somewhere in the gray, where it's like, it's not 100%, but it's all not completely innocent.
Right.
So eventually Jeff and Tonya do get married. Tonya moves out from her mom and spends more time with Jeff, and she's doing everything on her own now, including, which I thought was probably one of the better scenes on the ice, not necessarily from a technical standpoint, but from an acting standpoint. She creates her costume, her pink frilly one, and she does really well, and she gets low scores, and she skates back onto the ice. In the middle of, or right before another competitor begins, which is one of those really funny moments. But she goes over and she's like, you know, what's wrong with this? And she's asking her, and she says, well, maybe you're just not meant for this. Maybe you need to pick a different sport. And this is where if you've seen the trailer, you've seen the very emphatic "suck my dick" line, which I looked up, never actually happened.
No, I don't think so.
But actually, Tonya said that the real Tonya Harding, Tonya Price now, said that she wishes at that point she would have, because she had many people tell her those things. She was never as forceful with them, at least in public. So I think that was kind of interesting. But that happens, and then she yells, and she goes back, and then I think it's funny because the competitor is standing on the middle of the ice, and she goes back to her pose like, okay, I'm starting again, and as if it didn't faze her, but it's very awkward. So I thought
feel
that was
like
funny.
If that had happened in real life, she would have been disqualified from whatever competition that was.
Oh, I doubt she would have gotten the Olympic nod, because as we see, the Olympic Committee, especially the American Olympic Committee, is very prim and proper. At least they want it to seem that way. So if that had actually happened, we may not even be having this conversation right now. But they get married. Jeff and Tonya get married, and I thought the setting of the marriage was just amazing. It was like in this community center. And you see her dad come back, which they didn't really give a whole lot of attention to, but same actor as before, aged a little bit. So dad comes back. Tanya's mom, Lavonda, wants nothing to do with it. We see her in the hallway pouring some liquor into her coffee, and I think that we have a really interesting scene there in the hallway. What did you think of it?
Well, I think one thing just in the overall movie, first of all, was her mom was very much so an alcoholic.
Oh,
and
yeah.
in a lot of interviews, they talk about her intense alcoholism. And I thought it was nice. The movie was quite subtle with her alcoholism. You saw her with her flask pretty much in every scene.
Quite often, yeah.
But it was never really talked about or pointed out. It was just something you saw. So they didn't tell you, they just showed you. And I liked that. I thought that hallway scene was perhaps the most genuine moment we get to see between the two of them, like as close to a heartfelt connection that they'll ever have.
Yeah.
And it was still really sad because the way she calls Tonya an idiot for marrying an idiot or whatever.
Yeah, I think the line's like, you're supposed to screw the first dumb guy who tells you you're pretty, not marry him.
Yeah. And then the way Tonya just kind of accepts that and just kind of was like, all right, and just kind of walks away. It's sad because you can kind of tell Tonya was hoping for something more, and that's all she got. And in a way, it almost is like her mom doesn't know how to say anything tender.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it the last time we see her for quite a while? Like, we jump back into her story a little bit, and we see her at she is at the restaurant where she waits, and she's serving there. We see that a couple times, and we bring her back in later. But that's the last time she's kind of a focal point of the storyline for quite some time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a nice little segue of her saying, Tanya's saying, okay, you're not going to support me. I'm going to go do my thing.
Yeah.
Which was really well done. Like I was saying, like the setting I thought was perfect. Just the low lighting, the old cheap halogen bulbs, and it made perfect sense because of their financial status. It just, this is what they would have done. But still very happy and yeah.
I've been to weddings like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it definitely felt like a American low income wedding.
Well, especially like in the 90s. I mean, just the way she was dressed with the hair and the, almost like a permed hair. It just looked very 90s.
Yes.
So the marriage continues for a bit, and this kind of leads us. The next major element is the 91 Nationals. And we had a conversation about this on the way out of the theater. But this is where she actually lands the triple axel. And you had said that she lands it twice in one of her runs.
Not at the 91 U.S. Nationals. It was later on in the year. I think it was at Skate America.
Okay.
She landed the triple axel, and then she also landed a triple axel. I think it was a double toe combo.
Okay.
And that was the first time. So she has 3 firsts regarding the triple axel. First time a U.S. woman landed it. The first time a U.S. woman landed a triple axel combination, and then the first time a U.S. woman landed 2 in one competition.
Okay. Yeah, and that 91 is interesting because like you had said, if that would have happened, if the Olympics would have been 91, I mean, she would have been decorated like hell. Like she would have been
untouchable.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But she was a year early.
Yes.
But it was really cool because I've seen, and they show it at the very end of the movie, the actual one where she lands it for the first time in competition. And this was probably one of the more uplifting moments when she actually lands it, and you see the look of like just excitement and determination, but then realizing I'm not done yet, but just still that moment. And it's cool because you get a cool, a real nice close-up of Robbie as Tonya there, and it's that moment where she like kind of clenches her fists in that yes moment and continues, and that is so iconic if you've seen that actual triple axel ever done. And I thought it was really, really well done as far as just the cinematography of that specific scene.
I agree.
So I mean that was pretty neat. And this is where it starts to be all about Tanya's skating. And then the 92 Olympics happened, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it the 92 Olympics where she had the laces issue?
No, that was at 94 Lillehammer.
Okay. So with 92, she did not do well. She kept falling.
She got 4th place. She attempted the triple and fell. And so she ended up getting 4th place because she didn't complete. And then Midori Ito, a Japanese skater, attempted it and fell. But then she threw in another one and landed it.
Okay.
And that was a surprise, which is pretty cool.
Because they don't have to actually, because I remember watching a lot of figure skating when I was younger because my mom loved it, but I was younger and I didn't know any of the actual rules or anything. I know they turn in a potential, like, a plan.
Yes.
Do they have to follow that plan, or can they go off of it?
No, they can go off of it. Every skater has a program for the competitive season with their music and everything. And so they turn in the plan of what they want to do. But say you have a combination, a triple combination, let's say. You go in for your first one and you land it a little shaky, you can downgrade to a double. And it's better to complete something cleanly that's a little less technically difficult than to attempt, say, a triple and to fall.
Yeah.
So those are split-second decisions that the athletes have to make on the ice.
Yeah. And I remember hearing, like, some of the commentators saying, like, oh, here comes this. Oh, looks like they pulled back or they didn't do. So that makes perfect sense. But yeah, she didn't do very well. And I remember her talking about her skates had been a little loose, or her blade would have been a little loose. Like you had said earlier, she's kind of putting the blame on.
I think she broke something else. Her blade in practice.
That's right.
I believe that's what happened with Albertville in France.
Okay.
Albertville.
I think that sounds right. That sounds right. But yeah, so and this is kind of like that moment where she's like, all right, I'm done. I lost. I'm going to be too old for the next one. Can't do it anymore. So she goes back to Oregon and starts to serve. And it seems like it's the same restaurant as her mom. And if it's not, she's wearing the same outfit at one point that her mom is later.
It's some sort of crappy diner.
Yeah. So she's there, and this is where, and we haven't talked about her a lot, so let's talk about her now, is Diane, her trainer. So her trainer comes back. This is not the first time we've seen her. And what's her last name? Diane, let's see here. Diane Rawlinson.
That's right.
And Diane Rawlinson was her trainer pretty much, I mean, from the beginning. You have Levana, who at the very beginning of the movie says, she's good. She's young, but she's good. You need to train her. And she is her trainer all the way through the 92 Olympics. Then she fires her because she's mad because she didn't do well. But she comes back. And you had said that you had Julianne Nicholson, who did quite a good job portraying Diane. Why do you think that?
Well, she just really captured Diane's mannerisms very well. Diane is a very soft-spoken woman. She's very, I would say, like a delicate speaker. So she's speaking of unpleasant things. She kind of dances around the unpleasantness.
We all know that person.
Yeah. And I thought, honestly, I think of everyone in terms of being accurate to the real-life people. I feel like the actress who played Diane captured her personality the best. And I think it's really interesting because Diane is such a polar opposite of Tonya and her mother in terms of personality. Yeah. So to see that clash between the two mindsets is really interesting. And if Diane had been a bit firmer with Tonya, she might have had a better overall career. Yeah. Because Tonya was just so defensive. And I think it comes from a place of insecurity.
Stubborn. Yeah, I mean, very, very much so.
Just really dug in her heels when anybody would suggest any type of demeanor change, even just in the public eye.
Yeah. Well, and I would know it had a lot to do with the ability. Like, she could land the triple axel. So it's like, and you see this a lot even in modern athletes, where it's these younger ones who aren't as mature. It's like they can hang their hat on their athletic ability, so what's it matter anything else? I'm better than you or anybody else at this, so that's what you need to pay me for. That's what you need to scout me for, whatever it might be. But there's more to it, and I agree. I think that if Diane would have been firmer, it would have changed a lot of things, which is kind of interesting because when she comes back and tries to convince her to do the 94s, which I didn't realize. I always thought they were on opposite years, but that seems like
that. Yeah. It used to be more on the same year up until 92. So then that switch in the 94 when they were separating the timing from the Summer Olympics to every 2 years. It used to be in the same year. And so that was a golden opportunity for Tonya Harding here, which unfortunately was very squandered.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a little bit. Yeah, but she gets her to go for it. She says, all right, you got 2 years, and I'm going to train you, but she says, like, no rock music and no nail polish. And she said something else, but which is funny as she begins to train her, every time she gets onto the ice, she holds her hands up to show her, like, I'm not wearing nail polish. And she's like, okay, good. Where it's that firmer hand that perhaps she needed earlier. And this is where we start as we're getting closer to the 94 Olympics, we see the first kind of groundwork for this whole storyline taking place, which is the death threats that she received and this wasn't the Olympics, this was beforehand.
I think it was was it not? It was not U.S. Nationals. It was another competition. I don't know what they said exactly.
Yeah.
She was preparing for a competition leading up to it.
One of the prep ones leading up to nationals. And
she ended up not skating.
Yeah. So that she received there's a death threat that
might have been Skate America.
That might have been it. They pulled that one out a few times. So that would not be surprised if that were the event. She's saying, the police show up saying, hey, we've just received a death threat. They said if Tonya skates, she can expect 4 shots in the back or something like that. People are going to kill her. And so she doesn't skate. And the thought process between Jeff and Sean, and kind of a little bit of Tonya, but not as much, at least portrayed in the movie, is that they should do the same thing to Nancy, because it's not always about the actual follow through, it's the mental game. It's all about mental game. And they're like, well, if we can give her a little leg up, we just kind of an eye for an eye, because they're almost positive that it was somebody that was dealing with Nancy, because there's a little rivalry going on there. And so the plan begins with the whole Nancy Kerrigan situation to send letters to her to say that, death threats, kind of just the same thing for you. And the actuality of the plan turns into Sean taking over a little bit more, and two goons or two crooks being scouting out where Kerrigan is practicing and attacking her, the clubbing of the knee, which they refer to. It was cool, the documentary style. They talk about the incident, and I'm just like, and especially Janny's character saying, "Ah, yes, the damn incident." Like everybody just knows this is the beginning of the end.
Incident, yes.
So we'll get into that in just a second, because I think that's really where the second half of the movie goes. Before we do that, though, let's take a little break. Let's all go to the lobby, get your refill on, your soda, your popcorn, your jujubes, and all that fun stuff. And we're going to find out what's coming up soon from Eventide.
You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as a good conversation with intelligent company. Join comedian Don Smith every week as he sits down and talks with comedians, actors, filmmakers, writers, and everyday schmoes. It's The Life with Don Smith, Wednesdays at noon on 106.9 FM, and now available on the Eventide Entertainment podcast feed every Friday on Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes. The weekend is over. Monday is here, but that doesn't have to be the end of your fun. Every week, Ellison Smith brings you a new episode of Saltwater Gaming, breaking down video games of all different genres, consoles, platforms, and eras. Get it all every Monday on Saltwater Gaming, brought to you by Eventide Entertainment.
All right, welcome back to the second half of this week's episode of The Drive-In. We've been talking about Tonya Harding's story portrayed in I, Tonya. Just got done talking about, or introducing actually, the incident, the Nancy Kerrigan incident in the practice before the 94 Winter Olympics. So before we get into that, something that I'd written down that we haven't gotten to yet, but it has happened quite a lot, is the soundtrack. I made note early on, and actually throughout, the soundtrack I think was just done very well. You didn't have some famous John Williams composer putting this wonderful score to it. You just had a lot of pop music, some rock music from the 80s and 90s, and it just made sense. They have Dire Straits and Heart and all these other bands. I think it fit really well. Like, what were your thoughts on the movie's soundtrack?
Right. I think it fit well as well, because it just, honestly, everything that they chose to do in this movie reflects Tonya Harding.
Oh, yeah.
This soundtrack was Tonya Harding. She skated to ZZ Top and the soundtrack from Jurassic Park. She didn't skate to, Brahms or Chopin or whatever. Tonya Harding is rock music. Tonya Harding is Bud Light. Tonya Harding is trucks and, monster rallies and things like that. She isn't ballet and classical music, and it wouldn't have made sense for them to have a composer create something. Because, that's another thing. Tonya Harding never had somebody make things for her. She made her own costumes. She chose her own music. She didn't have Vera Wang making a $13,000 outfit like other people. Yeah. Right?
And that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. It makes sense.
Everything in this movie reflects Tonya Harding's nature. And the soundtrack is no exception.
Yeah. And actually, it's kind of like I was looking up some of the songs, and it's like a greatest hits of the late 80s, early 90s. And that was one of the highlights that I thought. The movie was great, but the soundtrack was a really good addition as well. So, okay, we introduced, but we did not talk about the Nancy Kerrigan incident. Let's lay out the groundwork. So, these two guys are hired by their friends or associates, inside men.
I got it, guys.
Got guys. Of Sean. And he's saying, it'd cost you $1,000. Telling Jeff, you give me $1,000, we'll get it taken care of. Because they have to have an alibi of being training somewhere else when these letters show up. And they can't have them postmarked from Oregon because everybody will know. Yeah. So it makes all this sense. I don't know. The movie does not necessarily give us the answers to this, probably because the answers don't exist anywhere. But in translation of sending death threat letters and what actually happened that night, we don't really get a clear answer of how it happened that way. Where it transitioned into an attack.
Right. honestly, the death threat letters was new to me.
Okay.
So I think that this is actually the one part of the movie where I feel like it kind of lessened for me, because I was hoping it would be very ambiguous. One thing I love about Tonya Harding so much is she's such an ambiguous character. We just don't know what her involvement was. And this movie went a little too clearly. Tonya was a victim of her circumstances and not an actual perpetrator.
Oh yeah, and they will throw all the blame essentially on Sean.
Right. And I felt like that was a little too heavy-handed. I wanted it more ambiguous. But in terms of the plan, we don't, because everybody has a different story, so we don't know how the hitting of the knee came in. I've seen a interview, and I believe it was with Slant, where he was it was in the 90s, and he was like, the idea of me cutting her Achilles tendon came up, and he said that he thought it was too drastic. So there's his side of the story where it's like they wanted me to do something way more violent, whereas in the movie it's presented as Galooly and Harding only wanted him to send letters, which
I think is really interesting. Slant's the guy who actually attacked her, correct?
Yes.
And he is portrayed like an oaf in the movie, like a guy who can barely even blow his own nose.
I mean, he
like
is.
Just this snotty. Okay, well, good. There you go. But just a grease ball, a guy who really does not really pay a whole lot of attention to his personal hygiene and whatnot. And we haven't mentioned this character yet. And I might even be saying the guy's name wrong, but Bobby Cannavale, who played Martin Maddox, the reporter, he is sprinkled in the movie throughout, but he kind of jumps out a little bit more during the incident because he's reporting what happened. He's talking about it as like this beat journalist who's like, "This was great. You can't write this stuff," and he's talking about how this all went down, of the absurd reality of what they did. And they show at one point how the getaway driver, in order to avoid suspicion, would every 15 minutes move his car. And this is in Massachusetts. He's moving his car every 15 minutes outside of where the practice session or the practice arena is for Nancy Kerrigan, only to find out that he did this for 2 weeks. Was it?
It was 2 days.
2 days. Okay, so 2 days, only to find out that she was practicing in Detroit,
in Michigan.
Michigan. So. It's just one of those things where he's talking about this, and
they
it's
were
really funny.
Very stupid. They would use credit cards for everything, which is incredibly easy to trace.
Oh yeah,
and they didn't pay attention to any kind of security footage. They were very dumb.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes so obvious that we can actually start to make some connections. The FBI gets involved. Well, actually, hold on. Before we go to that, we need to talk about the actual hitting. So he walks into the arena, Slate, walks into the arena, asks the guy, "Hey, who's Kerrigan?" He points out the skater who's in the white getup, and then she gets off the ice, and he follows her, has this baton, whips it out, hits her in the knee, and then tries to bolt.
Right.
And you had even were telling me the actuality of it. So in comparison, I'll say what happens in the movie, and then you can kind of give us the rundown. Okay. So in the movie, the guy hits her in the knee and then bolts. He's trying to get out of there.
Yes.
There's a chained double door window, a glass double door exiting the arena, and he can't get out, so he smashes his head against it, and then jumps out and runs to tackles a guy, and then runs up to the getaway car that's probably driving at 25 miles an hour, it seemed. I'm like, this guy's pretty fast for being this oaf. But he gets into the car, and he's like, go, 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 go. In actuality, what happened in real life?
Well, they'd gone the day before, and they had scoped out the area. So they had done some surveillance, at least. And so, yes, he manages to sneak in. He sees Kerrigan. He notices they all exit the arena where they've been practicing from the same hallway, and there's the curtain, and you can see that in footage of the event, the incident. And he has a police baton, a retractable police baton, and he hits her just above her right knee. So what happened injury-wise was she just had severe bruising, essentially. If it had been a little lower, it would have broken her kneecap.
Yeah.
And if it had been a little higher, the muscle probably would have calcified, and that would have absolutely ended her career. But as it turns out, she just had a very bad bruise, essentially. So then he runs out, but the day before when he had been there to scope out the area, the chain doors were unlocked. So for whatever reason, today, they were locked up, so he couldn't get out. So he ended up running around. He didn't break the door. He ended up running around the arena for a while and found another way out. And then he went to where his friend was with the escape car, and the car was gone because there had been a bunch of buses, so he couldn't park there. So he ended up tossing the baton in the snow, which you do see in the
You see him, like, throw it away. It's probably
That's
in the middle.
essentially what happens, yeah. And he runs down the block, essentially, until he can find his friend, and they get back. So it was, like, a little dramatic interpretation there, but more or less, that's what happens.
So there you go. There's the incident. The FBI starts looking into things because things seem a little fishy. Clearly, someone was attacked, and there's there's a lot of connections here and there, and they find the letter that, or not a letter, but a piece of scratch paper that's written in Tonya's handwriting outside the arena, and all these other things that kind of make it like, okay, we need to look into this. So FBI starts looking into things, and there's one night where they come up and they question Tonya and Jeff, and they mention. Is it Slate's name? But they say him by his first name, I think. But they say, who's so-and-so? Who's Derek? Or, something like that. And they're like, I don't know this guy. I don't know anybody named this. He's like, I know a lot. And then you've got Jeff Glulley who says, I know a lot of Dereks. And they kind of play it off as they have no idea. Well, they get in the car and they're like, okay, somebody knows something. They have no connection to us, to this guy. So someone said something. And they talk to Sean. They're like, Sean, he's like, I'm a steel trap. I wouldn't say anything. I could be tortured and I wouldn't say anything. And then immediately it cuts to the moment that he blabbed to the FBI, which I thought was cool editing. That was funny. And you have him, after all this bragging, he said he never would say anything about this. And I think it's 4 or 5 separate scenes in like a montage of him talking about, the Nancy Kerrigan? That was me. I set that up. And he's this very braggadocious, hey, he wants the attention for it. Which is where we really start to see the mastermind Sean, which it makes me laugh to even say that. Mastermind Sean Eckert, and he has the control of the situation. We find out he called in the death threats to Tonya, basically so that he could do this. He wants to be this, bring the system down kind of a guy. He's a huge believer in all of these different, superstitions and government conspiracies and things like that. Which I don't believe that he had the ability to do all this, but again, I don't know. It's the movie portrays it as he does have the ability somehow, but as you were saying, that it seems more likely that Glulley had a little bit more to do with it than the movie portrayed.
Yeah, I think he definitely had the ability to be that big of a screw up.
Yeah,
because it was not finessed at all, and he definitely is a conspiracy theory kind of person. When you watch interviews with him, he's like, oh, I have many connections to secret government entities.
No, you're not. Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't. Yes, I do.
Yeah, but I do.
But I do.
And that so I could see where in his very convoluted and narcissistic mental state, where he believes that this would be the perfect crime, and no one would ever figure it out.
I've got to question this. His parents, what's going on with them? Because it seems like in every situation, they are in the room or helping him. They know that he has done this, and they're like proud of him. They're taping over his Star Trek, but they're taping all of the news because they're like, he did this, and they're excited about it. Like, I don't know anything about that aspect of it in reality, but if that was true, like, wouldn't they have had some sort of legal obligation to it as well? Like, if they were completely aware of their son having done this?
I don't know how involved his parents were. I know that Jeff Glulley lived with him in the basement for a while.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know how involved his parents were, and perhaps they're just a family of, narcissistic, egotistical conspiracy
it was just kind of weird. It was weird that I kept seeing like the parents involved, and like Sean calls Jeff, and the parents are eating dinner, and there's all these different things where they're there, but they don't really have a major part in it, which, that might have just been product of circumstance there. But as the story continues on, Tonya starts to figure out that maybe Jeff did have more and more to do with it. She goes to the FBI. She doesn't necessarily turn him in, but she gives her statement, which kind of more or less indicts him and Sean as being like, they did this. And I was aware of this element of it. And she's just trying to kind of cut off the bleeding and prevent it from going any further. And this eventually leads to their divorce. And it's again one of those white trash stereotypical divorce situations, because he confronts her and she locks the door, she's packing, and she throws it out the window through front window and leaves in her truck. I thought that was actually a pretty strong moment for the character, where she kind of, like you had mentioned earlier, the cycle of the domestic abuse and the domestic violence, but she prevents it, at least at that point, because she escapes, and she says, he's sweet talking her again, and she, puts a stop to it and leaves, only to get back with him a little later, before the 94, realizing that she needs him to do it. And I'm not really sure why, but it was cool the way they did it, because they had both Tonya and Jeff, the actors, saying it in that documentary at the same time, I can't do this without you. And Jeff was excited. He's like, she said, I can't do this without you. And she was kind of defeated in the way she said it.
Tonya Harding maintains that she filed for divorce against him and that she was 100% done. And then representatives of the National Figure Skating Foundation, whatever the actual name is, came to her and said, you need to have a wholesome all-American family, and so you need to work it out with your husband or you're not going to be on the Olympic team. So that's why she said, I need you. And of course, they deny ever saying that.
Of course.
Which, how you're going to deny it.
Yeah,
so.
You don't want any connection to the guy who became a verb, as he said.
And you don't know if that's true or not, because, did they explicitly tell Tonya Harding that, the way she maintains? And so, therefore, she can, again, deflect blame. It's like, I didn't want to go back to him. They made me.
Yeah.
Or did they more imply it? You need to have a certain image.
And that's how she took it.
Right. Or did she just decide to go back with him because of that's how their relationship is, and she concocted this excuse? Any one is plausible.
Yeah, they all make absolute sense, which is kind of a frustrating thing, is we just don't know where it could have gone. This is probably my favorite part of the movie. We have Allison Janney, who we said we haven't seen for quite some time, who goes back into the kind of fourth wall documentary interview, and she talks about where her plot got dropped pretty quickly. Or she mentions where the hell have I been in this movie? Which everybody in the theater, all 10 of us, we were all in this one together, though, after having sat through the first 2 minutes of Greatest Showman. So we were all together in this, but they were all laughing because, she was such a strong element at the beginning of the movie that it wasn't like they pushed her out. That's not the story. She had no interactions with her. And
they were quite estrained at that point.
Yeah.
So they did not interact during that time of her life. So.
And before we go on, we got to talk about the parrot that she had. I can't believe we haven't mentioned this yet. So the LaVonna Harding, Allison Janney segments where she's kind of interviewing. She's got her oxygen mask, or the nose oxygen thing on, and she's got her parrot sitting on her ear, on her shoulder, and the damn thing is nipping at her ear the whole time. And that had to have been impromptu, because a parrot, you can't train a parrot to nip at an ear. I'm sure you can, but you wouldn't, because that would be more of an aggressive tactic.
I don't know.
So Janney's got to be going through this and trying to keep in character and trying to say her lines and say them as she needs to. And well, this parrot keeps biting her ear, and she's like, "Stop it!" She keeps pulling her head away from the parrot, and it keeps doing it. And I would love to know more about this parrot, because it's just that, to me, if that wasn't planned, there's the Oscar right there.
Yeah, because the mom in the interviews does have a little green parrot thing on her shoulder. So the way she worked with the parrot, it just added to that almost element of absurdity. It was just so ridiculous because she never moved the bird, never took the bird off her shoulder.
Never even really got mad, just kind of like stop it.
Yeah,
like,
she kept jerking her head away and rolling on with the interview. It was really funny.
And so we do get, in this whole time, we've got all of the news vans, and everything becomes a big hubbub around Tonya Harding and Jeff and Sean. And they're scoping out and sticking outside the house the whole time. And it's kind of just been hell for all of them. And this is where you see Levana come back into it, and she's knocking on the door, and she comes in. And it's such a heart-wrenching moment, because you see for the first time actual love and care given to Tonya from her mother. And, it's a really, really special moment, and you're really like, okay, finally. And unfortunately, though, it was like it's a whole ruse to get Tonya to confess.
Yeah, that was definitely, I think, the saddest part of the whole movie, and why I said that the wedding scene probably was the most genuine moment that they could have together, because you think it's suspicious how kind she's being, and it's like, you've never acted this way.
Yeah.
And poor Tonya just wanted that so badly. It's like she to see her face fall when she discovers the recording thing in her mom's pocket. As soon as Allison's hand went into her pocket, I was like, oh,
yeah, the audience knew at that moment that there was something, but it took another minute or so before Tonya did. But yeah, it was one of those, she's like, well, it was kind of like off the record. Did you do it? You can tell me. And she's like, there's no way she would ever ask me that. Like, she doesn't act that way. So it's a big red flag, and she kicks her out. And that's kind of the end of it. I don't think we see them interacting after that point.
No, I think that was the last time.
And so yeah, and she kicks her out, and she, they continue on with the story. We see that Jeff then indicts Tonya, kind of saying she knew about it, which kind of puts us into a sticky situation, because this happens before the '94 Olympics, that she's kind of accused or becomes part of that situation more specifically. So they wait. They do hold off until after. And at the '94 Olympics, it just does not go well for Tonya.
No. That's actually one of the best scenes in the movie for Margot Robbie, is preparing for the long program when she's got the dark purple outfit on. And there's a scene where she's scrubbing her really ridiculous dark red cheeks in, and she's crying, and she's trying to smile, and she has dark purple lipstick on that's smudged on her teeth. Yeah. And it's such a perfect combination of all the different things of Tonya Harding, just seeing her just kind of crack apart.
It's like the layers are really, never more are they more present than in that scene, where it's like the disheveled mixed with the beauty mixed with the emotion and the passion. It's a real cool moment. Yeah, like
and there's no dialogue either. It's all just an acting speechless moment. Yeah. It's really good.
So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Because you see her too. The hair and makeup for this, I don't think they did not get a nod. But I think that they should have. I don't know. We talked about this last week with Mike about. I think that there are only 3 nominations for hair and makeup. But if it would have been expanded to 5, I think that I really would have included them, because they do such a good job, especially with the hair of the time period. And you see, Levana Harding with her hair, which is such a unique haircut. I don't think I've ever seen anybody with this kind of bowl cut mixed with a mullet. It's like
a weird page boy.
It's a bullet.
Kind of a bullet.
Yeah. It's just one of those weird things. But then that scene with the makeup and the hair being pulled back but still being kind of messy,
and that French braid kind of. Yeah, I thought overall they did a really nice job recreating all of Tonya's looks, for better or worse.
Yeah.
All of her major competition looks. They did it. And then there was montage of her getting low scores. And if you're familiar with Tonya Harding's skating career, you recognize, that's 91's Skate America, and that's this costume, and you recognize the different outfits she wore.
Yeah, it's just it was really it was well done from a historical accuracy point.
Absolutely.
And it's cool to go off of something that actually existed, but to recreate it so well is not always the easiest thing. So they did a really good job. So we've got the Tonya getting 8th place, Kerrigan getting 2nd, and there's a fun little moment in the documentary where we jump back to like present day or 2000s Tonya, where she says Nancy looked like she stepped in dog shit. Like she was so upset that she got a silver medal, whereas Tonya was like, I got 8th. I put just as much time and effort into this, and I got 8th, which again, like you said, it's a blame. It's look at her for not being happy with the silver as opposed to look at me not doing well enough to place. And so you really start to see the breakdown there between them, who apparently were friends. They even talk about they were close. Yeah, they were rivals, but they were always, rooming together and traveling together for a lot of these trips, which I don't know if was true, but it makes sense if it was.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's probably Tonya Harding's side of their relationship. And there's even a part where she's like, who would do that to a friend? Why would someone do that to a friend?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I always like watching in Tonya Harding interviews is she says, she's always like, I had no idea about this, or who would do something like that. And then she kind of gets this little smirk on her face. And it's kind of implied, but she deserved it.
Yeah.
There's just kind of that like general feeling.
Whether or not she had any involvement in it, she feels that the action may have been a little vindicated.
Yeah.
Or validated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And then this is, and you had, I'm really glad that you were there because I would have believed everything as it happened. But when we jumped after the incident, jump after 94 Olympics, where Tonya goes to court, she's found guilty, and it was obstruction of justice that she was found guilty of.
Yeah, it was the hiding of information from the authorities. Essentially, she knew things and didn't report it right away.
Yeah, and she gets the standard fees and things like that. But the thing that really was the most heart-wrenching was that she was then banned from all competitive skating for life. As you had said, that wouldn't have happened in the courts.
There was, I looked it up to make sure that I had my facts straight.
Yeah.
And it was half right.
Okay.
So yeah, she got probation and everything. And then she was not allowed to compete in the upcoming World Figure Skating competition. Okay. I think she'd been signed up for already. And then she was, they said you must retire from the National Figure Skating Foundation. And then that, I don't know the actual name of it, but the United States Foundation. And then they did their own investigation, and then they ruled, you're never allowed to compete again, and you can never coach or have any kind of participation in anything.
Yeah.
And so then she could have gone pro and done ice capades or whatever. Yeah. But of course at that point her image was so tarnished, nobody would hire her. Which,
that's in that court ruling we get what I think if Robbie does win the Oscar, a lot of it's going to have to deal with this essential final monologue, at least the dramatic monologue that she has, where she's talking about, they referring to Jeff and Sean and all these other guys, they got 18 months. They got a little bit of jail time. Give me that. Don't take away my figure skating. That's the only thing I'm good at. I don't have an education. I'm not good at anything else. I'm a divorcee that has nothing to her other than this, and you're taking that away from me, and pleading with the judge, give me jail time. I will, just don't take this from me. And it was really, really powerful. She did a great job. It was very believable, especially had this not because this didn't actually happen in this specific way, word for word, verbatim. It really summed up, I'm sure, how Harding was feeling over a more extended period of time into one specific moment, which I think was just very, very powerful, very believable. And it was, when you're looking for Oscar wins, not just nominations, it's how many of those moments do you get? And that one was a powerful one, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely. It was, you're right. It's a culmination of the whole hammer that was brought down on her. And this movie presented it as, this sentence is way too harsh for her level of involvement in the crime. Depending on how you see her involvement in the crime, it could be, some viewers I'm sure were like, this was very apt, you should just take your punishment, this is what you deserve.
At least you're not getting jail time.
Yeah.
Be happy for that.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So that's how it kind of wraps up, at least from the figure skating aspect of it. We see kind of a conclusion of Gillooly and Harding as far as their interviews, and Jeff makes an acknowledgement of he's truly sorry for ruining her career. He takes ownership of it in a statement where he says, had I not even jumped in and gotten involved in any way, she'd probably had done so much more, and she would not have this tarnish on herself. And he truly feels sorry, at least Sebastian Stan's portrayal. And we wrap up the movie with the female boxing, how she goes on to become a female boxer, because you know what, if that's the image everyone's going to give her and that's the thing she can do, she's going to do it, which seems very Tonya to just say screw it and forget everything else, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm almost surprised to a degree that they didn't mention the celebrity boxing between her and Nancy. Do you remember that? That was on like Fox, where Fox did a bunch of.
It wasn't Nancy Kerrigan though.
It wasn't?
No.
Who was it? Because I could have swore it was. And
Paula
it was like
Jones? Is that the woman who sued Bill Clinton for sexual harassment?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. Nancy Kerrigan is way too much of a lady to ever do celebrity boxing. I believe. Is it Paula Jones? Is that her name?
Let's see. Yeah, it is Paula Jones.
All right.
Okay. Well.
So, yeah.
Hell, that would have been even better, though. Nancy and Tonya, the boxing ring.
Yeah, right? No, that would have been wild. It was Paula Jones, and that, from what I understand of that, it was a bunch of D-list celebrities.
Oh, celebrity boxing was a joke.
Right.
Yeah, it was horrible.
It was... People paid enough attention to it to where Tonya was like, maybe this is something I can do now to pay my bills for a while. And she had a pretty lackluster professional career in boxing. Yeah. But
and that those final scenes of that really show that, where it's like she had some moments, enough of these moments in her boxing career where it was like, okay, it lasted for a little bit. But, like, let's be honest, she's getting her ass kicked because she's a figure skater. She's a figure skater who grew up in this kind of redneck lifestyle. She's not a professional boxer. No. So she landed some punches, but aptly, the last image we have of her is she gets punched. And I thought this was really cool. Really good callback to this uppercut that she receives, and then they go into slow motion, and she's twisting away from the hit. And it mirrors, in some ways, the slow motion of the triple axel from earlier in the movie. And it's going the opposite direction, kind of like she is coming full circle, and now at this point, then she lands on her face, spits out a bunch of blood, gets up and continues fighting, but we just see the feet. That was cool. That was a really good callback. Well done. If you don't want to overdo slow motion in any situation, but if you're going to use it more than once in a movie, to call it back that way, I thought was pretty neat. And that's it. Then the movie wraps up with a little bit of the, where are they now kind of a situation of everybody. One of the things that they incorporated was that Tonya wanted everybody to know that she's a good mom. And that's the really, really cool part about this, is that she was consulted in this. They may not have completely said everything you say is going to be said this way, but they at least, somebody who's trying to escape something that happened, like you said, 30 years ago almost now, to the point where we don't want to further just demolish their reputation. They've moved on, they've done their quote unquote time for this, and everybody's kind of forgiven them for it. So I think that was nice that they included the moment of she's a good mom. Having whatever, if you want to blame her situation for her mother's abusiveness, Jeff's abusiveness, or just herself, it was just a nice kind of wrap up. And then they give us some video, which was nice. Some video of the triple axel from her, the actual 1990s video of her and Jeff in the car. We have Sean's interview. We have her mom's interviews. And a lot of this then shows us like, hey, look, it's kind of like look how closely we did everything. Yeah. But it was also very neat to see the reality.
I think that happens a lot in a lot of biopics, is at the end they'll kind of show some actual footage. So you can kind of go, oh, that's what the real person was like.
I always like that.
I do too.
I look forward to it. I almost wanted to see more of it, because I'm just like, all right, now I'm invested in this story. Give me another 15 minutes of real stuff.
There's tons of footage on YouTube. You can dive into. I have watched a lot of it. It's fascinating to watch.
Well, okay, so we talked about this throughout a little bit, but I just want your, it's kind of a twofold wrap-up question with this. So how does this movie overall compare, in your opinion, to the real story? And while we're on the topic of the real story, what is your insights? What do you think actually happened?
Okay. I think this movie did a pretty good job of showing everything. They hit all of the points in her career that were big moments, and I think they did a good job of showing all of the circumstances in her life that negatively impacted her and how she was such an underdog compared to many of the other women she was skating against. I think this particular movie went a little too sympathetic, especially with Galooly, and I think that they could have done things a bit more ambiguously with intent, because the fact is we don't know, and at this point I'm not even sure Tonya Harding knows the truth anymore.
That's a good point.
She is really stuck to her side of the story so hard that if it was a lie in the 90s, it's the truth now kind of a thing.
You tell yourself a lie so much it becomes your own truth. Yeah,
exactly. So I do think that they kind of took an easy out, making the moron the bad guy.
Yeah,
like
makes sense that way.
It was a little too easy. Like real life is more gray than that, and so that felt a little bit like a cop out in my opinion. And as for what I think really happened, I think Tonya Harding was probably a bit more involved. What I think happened was she gets the opportunity to go to the Olympics again. Like there's the potential to go again. Mm-hmm. And I could see her sitting around with Sean, her bodyguard, and her husband, Jeff, maybe drinking a little bit. And, you know, when you're feeling jealous and insecure and worried about something, you say things that you don't mean. I could easily picture her being like, that Nancy Kerrigan, she thinks she's so much better than me. She thinks that, you know, she can just come in there and take all the glory, and she's never had to work hard like I have. I've never had, you know, she's never had this kind of life that I've had. Like, she doesn't deserve it the way I do. You know, I wish someone would just take her out. I wish she'd have an accident. I wish, you know, something would happen to her because she doesn't even deserve it. So
and there's Sean, who's going to take it too literal.
Exactly.
And Jeff, who wants to keep his wife.
Right. And there's a slight mention of this. Tanya's story is that Sean wanted to start a security business, and so he and Jeff got it in their heads that if Tonya wins gold at the Olympics, she'll finally get all of this endorsement money from being a gold medalist, and then they can take that money and start their own business and become successful themselves. So that was kind of her side of the motivation, which I can see. Mm-hmm. But so I think that maybe Tonya, I really don't think she was involved with the actual planning of the assault, but I think that when she found out about it, she was not clueless. I think she went, oh, you know, I could easily see her being like, I know exactly how this happened, because she knew the people.
And anytime you see her, after the incident occurs, anytime you see her being interviewed, there's like an oh shit on her face. Mm. There's like this moment of like any point in time she could be found out. She looks scared. Mm. Like she looks like this badass, I don't care what you think, up until that moment. And then anytime after that, she genuinely just has a little bit of fear in these interviews. And at least, you know, that's just the way I see them. And so maybe you know, we don't know exactly how much, but you know, I think you've got some validity there of saying that she probably had a lot more to do with it than, or at least knowledge of it, than she's letting on.
Yeah, I don't think she ever sincerely wanted Nancy to be attacked or anything, but I do think she probably felt it in her, you know, like, it's like that secret desire, you know, you never want to admit to having those dark thoughts about somebody because you're jealous of them or you're insecure because of them, and you would wish, you know, if they hadn't tried out for this position, if they hadn't interviewed for this position, if they hadn't done this, I would have gotten it. And so, you know, those aren't feelings you want to admit to.
But everybody on some scale
has them.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about this a little bit. Robbie and Janie both got Oscar nominations. In comparison to those, I know you said you haven't seen a ton of them, but this year you've seen more than normal. Where do you think that they stand? So Robbie's going up against, well, for instance, she's going up against I can't think of her name right now, but from Shape of Water.
Is it Sally Hawkins?
Yes, Sally Hawkins. Thank you. There you go. Sally Hawkins, Saoirse Ronan from Lady Bird, which I can throw my 2 cents in on that one. Meryl Streep, which I don't know if Meryl's going to get it. Me and Mike talked about this last week, but
what movie?
Streep was in The Post.
The Post, that's right.
And the last person is escaping me right now. But where do you think she stands? Do you think she's got a shot of...
No. I think I would be fairly surprised if Margot Robbie won. Not because her acting was subpar in any way. I just could see them choosing Sally Hawkins or Saoirse Ronan over her in this particular year.
Yeah.
I do think Margot Robbie acted spectacularly. So it's certainly not for lack of quality.
Frances McDormand's the last one for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And that's another one. Oh, it's so good. You gotta go see that.
Really?
So, yeah, me and Mike talked about this last week, and now that I have seen all 5 of these, I don't think Robbie's got it. I think she did a great job. I think it's between Ronan and McDormand, honestly. Hawkins is a dark horse. Streep's done so much better than she did in The Post, but...
and it would be boring, honestly, to have Meryl Streep win again.
Yeah. And you've got all these people who've never been nominated. I think this is Hawkins, Robbie, and Ronan's first nomination, at least in lead actress. And so this would be great. A great opportunity.
Was Margot Robbie nominated for Wolf of Wall Street?
I don't think she was.
I don't remember.
I don't believe she was.
But talk about two movies set in the same era with wildly different appearances from Margot Robbie, huh? Because in Wolf of Wall Street, she was so elegant, even with that accent. She still looked stunningly beautiful. And then in this one, they really they really did every rough part of the late '80s and early '90s.
They bring out. Supporting actress, though, Allison Janney, I think she's got a shot. After seeing Lady Bird, I think Laurie Metcalf has a really, really strong case. I hope it's one of those two. Nothing against Mary J. Blige, because I haven't seen Mudbound, so I couldn't speak on that. Leslie Manville in Phantom Thread, and Octavia Spencer. Spencer's had plenty of Oscar love. And Shape of Water, she was great, but I think that Metcalf and Janney, and I hope Janney gets it. We talked about it earlier. She's the hometown girl. I'm really pulling for her. To bring that one.
Right. In terms of Shape of Water, I would pick the actor who played her neighbor. What's that guy's name?
That is, what's his name? It's right in front of me. Richard Jenkins.
Yeah, I would have, of the supporting actors from Shape of Water, I'd pick Richard Jenkins over Octavia Spencer for this particular movie. Yeah. But I would love to see Allison Janney win. I thought she was fantastic in this movie. And then I also think that just her career has been very good.
Yeah.
So it would
she's kind of had a new boon. It's not like she's been obscure or kind of this no-namer. She's been quite popular for some time, but it seems like the past few years she's really jumped into more prolific roles. She's doing more than just the mom. I mean, she's a mom in this one, but she's doing more than... She really does portray a lot of moms. She's in the TV show Mom, playing the mom with, what's her name? Chris Pratt's wife, or former wife.
Anna Faris?
Anna Faris, thank you. There you go. Yeah. I mean, so she plays a lot of moms, but now she's playing... She's in a lot more. She was on Broadway doing some phenomenal things last year, so it's really cool to see someone who's kind of paid their dues and is... taken a while to get the national attention, and now she's getting some Oscar attention. So let's hope she can finish it off and bring that one home. Okay, so final thoughts on the movie, and then I've been going back and forth. I don't want to be tasteless in my ranking, so I originally had 1 to 5 broken knees, but that seems a little rough. I mean, that seems a little out of taste. So what would you say if we have our ranking scale of 1 to 5 stars, but instead of stars, we say for this movie. Gold medals.
Rotations on your axle.
How many triple axles? How many triple axles out of 1 to 5 would you give this? But with your final thoughts beforehand.
My final thoughts are: it's a really interesting film about a very significant moment in sports and American history, and pop culture in general. And I think it's a fairly fair view on this really contested moment. And I think I would give it 4 out of 5 triple axles.
All right.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty close up there with you. I appreciated it. It was one of the, once I finally got to see the damn thing, it's been one that when I first saw it, I was like, I, Tonya, and I kind of glanced over it. I wasn't even looking at it, but I'm like, oh, this is Tonya Harding's story. Like, that could be really interesting. And so I think it definitely matches the hype that surrounded it. I don't know if it surpasses it, but it matches it. I think it was well done. The casting was very strong, although it was very difficult to see Sebastian Stan not as the Winter Soldier from Avengers. He's the same same
Okay.
guy. You're like, oh, that's why I look familiar. He had the horrible mustache and then also the horrible goatee as Glooly, both of them. But I mean, that's what the guy looked like. So, but yeah, the casting was strong. The soundtrack was great. The acting within it, I think everybody did a really good job. There weren't any major holes as far as a film stance. Any holes were just the holes that were there because of the missing plot of reality. Mm-hmm. I would probably give it a 4 as well. Is it the best movie? A lot of people are upset it didn't get a Best Picture nod. I'm okay with it. It's a good movie. But in comparison to some of the other ones, I don't know if it beats any of them. Granted, there's still 2 I haven't seen. But overall, I think that it got the attention it needed. Robbie and Janny really needed it. Outside of that, I don't really know if you would give anybody a nod. The cinematography, maybe, just because of... I don't know. And in comparison, I don't know. I think that it is where it needs to be. So if you go into it expecting some amazing, amazing movie, you might be a little disappointed, but it was good. You get your money's worth. I highly recommend it, especially if you're interested in the Tonya Harding storyline. If you have any interest in just kind of, like Amanda said early, just good stories. Mm. It's one of these stories that doesn't have a real ending, that we may never know. It may come out someday, but realistically, what we have is what we're going to have. So I think that that's one of those really interesting aspects of the movie. So 4 out of 5 from both of us. It's a good movie. So go check it out. Go check it out while you can, because who knows how long it'll be in theaters. Not because it's not good, but just, movie theaters are weird around this time, as we found out. So that's it. That is it for us this week. Amanda, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I really, really appreciated your insights, because I was a little baby when all this happened. So
yeah, I was too. I don't remember. I was alive when this Olympic happened, but I don't remember what happened. I remember the 96 Olympics very strongly in Atlanta. Yeah. I don't remember 94 at all. For some reason, I think the first winter that I remember is 98, and I was like, didn't we just have the Olympics? I was too young to realize that it was every 2 years. Summer versus winter.
Yeah. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. We'll have to try to find another movie for you to come on again here soon with.
Absolutely.
So next week, I am going to be seeing Winchester, another one that Amanda's excited for.
Oh my gosh. Talk about my 2 passions in life. Tonya Harding and the Winchester Mystery House are 2 of my secret passions.
Yeah, so I'm going to see Winchester. I'm excited for it. It did come out this week, but we're a little behind me with the whole I, Tonya thing, but we'll get back on track with it. Winchester with actually an old teacher friend. Ben is also a really big fan of horror movies, and he's been listening to the podcast too and wants to get on. So we're going to get him on next week. As always, especially, I want to get everybody's insights into this one. On Twitter, you can let us know what your thoughts are on I, Tonya, or maybe if you even haven't seen the movie and you just want to give us your 2 cents on what you think happened in the whole 1994 incident. You can do that on @DriveInEventide. Or you can email me and get your information spoken out on next week's podcast, your thoughts and opinions at our email address, driveineventide@gmail.com. Until then, though, have a great, great weekend. Hopefully, this will actually be coming out after the Super Bowl, so hopefully the Patriots did not win again. I'm not even an Eagles fan. I'm a Packer fan, so just hoping that we can keep it out of Brady's hands this time. So we will find out. I'm going to predict this is the day of the Super Bowl. I'm going to go 24-21 Eagles. Amanda's looking at me because as she told us, she's not a sports fan, so or big sports person. But Amanda, what's your Super Bowl prediction?
I predict that there will be 2 teams, and they will play against one another, and someone will win.
And Justin Timberlake's halftime show will be something special. I'm hoping that Janet Jackson makes an appearance.
That would be fun.
That'd be cool. So we'll see. There's our little predictions. But until next time, guys, drive home safely. And Amanda, thank you very much for coming on again.
Thank you.